1951, when Nkrumah became the leader of government business, he followed a 10-year plan, interestingly. And that was under it. Most of the positive things were done, even though when we became independent, it was adjusted. There was a 1-year transition. But basically, that framework continued until 1960. And every Ghanaian can point to a lot of achievement during that period. Of course, he lost his way when we became a republic. I mean, a lot of, when I hear people talking about the 7-year development plan, it was just more or less was good documents. Interestingly, it was prepared under the leadership of J.H. Mensah. Yes, J.H. Mensah was the secretary of planning.
Small world.
The 7-year development plan was actually the product of J.H. Mensah.
Who later became minority leader and senior minister of the J. Kufuor government.
Yeah. Also, of course, he became.
Of course, he was leader of opposition.
Yes,
at a point.
It's quite interesting but he was actually a public servant under Nkrumah, and he was the key architect of the 7-year development plan. But what I want to say is not that. What the most important thing is that when the 7-year development plan came into being in 1963-64, the economy was in shambles. Nkrumah had no money, debt was accumulating, and people don't know that for almost 3 years, the 7-year development plan was supposedly implemented by Nkrumah, and nothing was done. So people say, if the 7-year development plan after Nkrumah had been followed, the reality is that the economic situation, the macroeconomic situation, the mismanagement of the economy was such that even under him, nothing was done. In fact, I was reading somewhere and I said, oh my goodness. Said that, under it we have the Akosombo. No, Akosombo took about 20 years to do. In fact, Akosombo came online in 1963. So it could have been done on most of the things that, and there's a lot to credit Nkrumah for Ghana, but none of them really was done under the 7-year development plan. It was before, and most of it when we had a 10-year plan. The point I'm trying to make is this. Whenever a nation consistently commits to a program for about 10 years or plus, like Goggisbeck, like the 1950s to early 60s, and under Kufuor's administration, when before that, under Rawlings, from 1983 to 1992, when we had the economic recovery program. So,
you mean 83 to 92?
83 to 92, yes. When we had this consistent program, and then we come to Kufuor under the Ghana Poverty Reduction Program.
1 and 2.
Yes, 1 and 2. You see that the country makes good strides. And therefore, it's something that we should, our own history shows that once we have a plan and we commit to and we implement it, the country moves forward significantly. And when we don't, as we have been experiencing for many parts of a significant part of our nation, the country goes haywire. And between especially 1973 and 1983, we development economists calls the lost decade. You won't believe that over that decade, because of the changes and inconsistencies, the average Ghanaian GDP per capita declined by 40%. I mean, it's unbelievable. And and there's no doubt that's what gave rise to these coups and interventions, because when there's economic future is not good, then it gives room for adventurists.
But some still argue that there was massive infrastructure investment by some of those presidents, some of those military era presidents.
Which were the massive ones?
The Snit Flats came in that era. The Snit Flats in most of the regional capitals came in that era.
Is that a massive infrastructure? When we are talking about massive infrastructure for our development, we are talking not about some Snit Flats, how much the people are. We are talking about changing the basic infrastructure of the country.
But have we seen a housing investment post the Snit Flat era as large as that?
The question is this. we are not going to house Ghanaians. That's my personal view.
Okay.
By public housing projects. It's just meant for political gimmicks. The economy should be such that the average Ghanaian should be able to build their own building and living. You cannot, we are not a communist country that the government is going to house people. There's a need. I mean, of course, I think that what is happening is quite despicable, whereby if you go on the Pram Road, buildings monies have been committed, and then they are not being finished and used. Those ones, it's just despicable. But at the end of the day, the average Ghanaian does not live in or going to live in a public housing project. But when it comes whereby we have good mortgages, where the rate of interest is about 6%, then you, the young man, and you have employment, you can build your own. So I don't think that when we are talking about massive infrastructure, we are talking about, say, the building of the Akosombo Dam, we are talking about rehabilitating our railways, we are talking about quality education. These are the ones that are going to, and not much of it was done in the turbulent years. There's no reason, whenever a government is in power for 4 years, certain things will be done. But we are talking about things that transform the economy, and that requires medium to longer term framework and pursuing it.
Prof Adei, if I am to understand you clearly, in the conversation that we've had, you've stated that beyond ERP of 82 to 92, or 83 to 92, pardon me, and the Nkrumah program, the first 10-year development plan of 51 to 61, and then a Gudgersberg plan, and then GPRS 1 and 2 under Kufuor. All of these have had foreign influence. So apart from those that have had foreign influence, we have actually not successfully implemented a plan or seen that graduated development.
Well, I must say that the content of the Nkrumah's one was quite Ghanaian. But yes, sad to say that we have not on our own committed to programs, and that is unfortunate, and that's what we need to do, and that is where we should be moving towards. Interestingly, by our constitution, the government must always come up with a medium-term program. So it's not, the programs have been done and they must be committed to. I must say that there was commitment under the Kufuor administration and then the earlier Rawlings era, because also of a little bit pressure from outside. But each of the governments has, come up with an 8-year program. And at this moment, we have the coordinated program of economic and social development policies. I must say that this is the first time for many years why we can say that that program has been done. I must, not under me, but the NDPC played a significant role in supporting the government to do it. And there seems to be some commitment, given the financial constraint, to implement it.
But then again, this government also started out in an IMF program. So the government started out in 2017 under the watchful eye of the IMF.
But the program is not the coordinated program. Actually what had happened, and again, sometimes some of us, our life touches the various history of Ghana. I mean, there was no doubt at all that at the time of the IMF program, things were going very bad economically. I was part of the Senchi group. In fact, myself, Kwesi Botwe, the late P.V. Obin, who else? There were 6 of us who chaired the Senchi consensus. And we were of the view that we needed that intervention. This government, when it came, that program was coming to an end. So, if anything at all, the current government had to see to the completion.
They extended it for a year. The finance minister claims even that some of the targets had not been met. They were nowhere near being met.
Yes. The only, when you come and meet an IMF program, if you don't complete it, it sends a signal to the international community and they will run down your economy. So I think that it was important for the government to conclude it. And in any case, sometimes the ordinary people think that, think in terms of NDC and MPP, but the outsiders think of in terms of Ghana. So I think that it was to the credit of the government not to have, excuse me to say, misbehaved and say that, this is an NDC one, and to bring it to a successful conclusion. But that 1 year was not what I'm saying, that the medium-term plan, the coordinated plan, which unfortunately I don't think that most of you, the journalists, have read it, or was not the result of that. It is the constitutional requirement for that to be done when a new administration comes. And it's a 8-year program, which is a medium-term program. And I think that getting the government committed to that and to implement it, to me, is far more important than the type of things you do. What is in the manifesto, we are counting it so that it says that, and those type of things, and not the petty things.